Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 179. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the evening of Friday, July the 10th, from poolside at the James Strong Show compound because we're not in studio because of the pandemic. My guest today, she's running for Congress, U.S. Congress, and she's I don't want to say jack of all trades because she would be a Jacqueline of all trades because she's a lady, not a man. But her name is Lynette Trares. That's pronounced correctly?
You are correct.
Okay. And she's running for U.S. Congress District 3 against Blaine Luetkemeyer. Welcome to the podcast, Lynette.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we had a conversation. You asked me, have you invited any of the other candidates? And I said, no, not really, not yet. And you said, why me? And I said, because I saw your sign. And I did some research. And I saw that you were running in the Republican primary against Blaine Luetkemeyer. And I'm thinking, who would run against Blaine Luetkemeyer? Because, I mean, this is a Republican district. He's been winning by landslides for years. Why would this lady want to go ahead and run against him? So I invited you, and you graciously came along. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to do this, first of all. So tell me, why would you run against Blaine Luetkemeyer for U.S. Congress?
Well, let me tell you. There's actually a few reasons. I felt like when I took a look at what was going on in our district, and like I said, I'm a lifer. I'm a Missouri resident since birth. I'm St. Louis and born in 1965. I'll just give my age away. I have been living in St. Charles County since 1974, and I have my education from Fort Zumwalt. I'm a graduate of 1983, alumni for all those folks out there listening. And then I decided to go to school locally as well. I attended Lindenwood University. I walked and got my bachelor's degree in human services in 1999. And then I followed suit with that with a master's program in professional counseling. I have been actually a resident that has called upon my congressional district to help me with some issues in the past. And I did not receive the response that I was expecting. And I actually probably didn't receive any response at all because I had called more than one congressional district because I had an office at one point in Chesterfield and I resided in St. Charles County. So I've called both my representatives, and I got no response. And it had to do with my business at the time, was the issue that I had a concern about. And then I started, taking a look at what was going on as well in my own small business. I talk to people every day. I have about 35 clients a week that I talk to, and we talk about issues of all sorts, all walks of background. People come to me, like I was telling you just a little bit earlier, from all over the region. There's many topics that go through. I mean, we talk about education, we talk about jobs, we talk about retooling in an economy that's still coming back from the Wall Street crash of 2008. And I've had a few people ask me, why don't you run for office? And as I was sharing with you, 10 years ago, I was working with the state of Missouri, which I've told, and you can see in my bio, I've held 5 different positions with the state of Missouri in the last 20 years. And I had actually considered working or actually entering the race for Senate, but I had young children at the time, and I didn't feel comfortable having the time that involved a campaign and also being gone for sessions and things like that to vote and so forth, and legislative requirements to do that at the time in my life. So when I started to think about it again recently in the last year, I took a look at Blaine Luetkenmeyer's, actually his legislative history in Congress. I also took a look at his actual bio and his education. I thought, my gosh, I've got more education than Blaine does, and I'm here in the state and I'm present in my community. And I also formed a nonprofit in 2016 with something you may not have known. I formed a breast cancer nonprofit called the Breast Ink Project that has something to do with my cosmetic tattoo business. And I also work with a Survivor Fashion Week every year that we put on as a nonprofit event to benefit Siteman Cancer Center.
Let's back up for just a minute. I don't want people to get the wrong impression. You said cosmetic tattoo business.
Correct.
So if I wanted a skull and crossbones put across my back, you don't do that.
No, I'll refer you out to another license.
Explain cosmetic tattoos and what they are.
A cosmetic tattoo actually has a lot of varying things you can do. Burn victims, scar camouflage, breast cancer survivors. You have breast cancer, reconstructive nipple tattooing. I do some facial tattooing for women that have lost their facial hair in regards to eyebrows, their eyelashes. Some people pull their eyelashes, pull their brow hair out. That's trichotillomania. You have people who suffer from alopecia. So, I mean, it just goes across the board. It really is not so much the vanity or the beauty aspect of it to me anymore. It has become more of what is a need and serving the community that way. And it's interesting to me how busy I stay. So
I just want to make sure that everyone knew what you did. It's this, not that.
No, and I'm not a jack of all trades, but I'm an educated woman that I have a background in nonprofit organization and serving the constituents of the state of Missouri and the district. Since 2000, when I got my bachelor's degree, I went to work for the Department of Social Services, and I worked with the Children's Division with foster care and adoptive placement. And
for how many years did you work?
I worked for that position about a year, and then I was actually kind of being recruited because literally I just returned from living overseas as a military spouse. We had been living in Germany for 3 years, and we were ATSing out in 2000 and coming back. So I actually, in between deployments, would come back. I've interned at the Probation and Parole Office for District 17. I worked for the Department of Youth Services. So, I mean, it can go on, but not to give you my resume so much. But I felt like when I looked at my credentials and as a public servant in the last 20 years serving the state of Missouri and serving my district, I looked at Blaine Luetkemeyer and I thought, I'm not a career politician. I'm a career public servant. And I just felt I could better serve my community at a federal level with legislative moves and proposing legislation for the needs and changes that this community wants to see.
What does the Republican Party think about this?
Well, I'm an outsider.
Yes.
Which I came out of nowhere, and I planned it that way.
So have they been in contact with you? Have they just let you do your own thing? Have they said, what are you doing? Leave this alone? I mean, can you talk about that?
Let me do my own thing. I'm kind of really good at that.
Okay.
Well, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I'm a self-made small business owner. So that was the other piece of it too. I mean, small business. I came out of nowhere with that as well, and I was very, very successful the way I marketed and the way I looked at building my business plan and serving again the community. I have not heard from the GOP as much as I've heard from some recent organizations for women's groups. I've been invited to talk to them and come and I basically talk about my campaign. And
so
what my
no
platform
strong arming saying, don't do this.
Oh, pulling me out?
Yeah.
No, I've had a few people, but that's more of a, not really, I would say the Republican Party has not reached out to me, no. I've had other opponents reach out to me.
Saying, what are you doing here?
Trying to get me to drop out.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of things like that.
Very good. I'll tell you who you remind me of also. In fact, I'm a lifelong independent, but I can also say that on a national level, I've never voted for a Democrat. I usually vote Republican or third party. But this last time, I voted in the Democratic primary for president, and I voted for Tulsi Gabbard. You remind me of her, and the reason being is because you've got your own idea of how to do things. Would that be an accurate comparison?
I don't think...
Politically, maybe not. Your ideas maybe are a tad different.
I think my ideas are actually more, I think, current with what's going on with the economy and what's going on with society and what's going on with our youth and our future of tomorrow. When I think about my ideas, I don't think of them as radical or anything out of the box. I mean, I've always been an out-of-the-box thinker. I'm a little more of a maverick of my own. I guess you could call me that.
Sure.
But I listen. I'm a great listener, and I'm a people person. So,
well, on this podcast, we're famous for having what I call free thinkers, okay? People who think outside the box, people who think a little bit differently, people who maybe aren't okay with the status quo all the time. You seemed to fit that niche as well, which is why I thought, I got to have this lady on the podcast.
Well, the status quo part of it, you've got totally down.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm not a cookie-cutter politician. I'm not going to say, that I am, pro-life, pro-God, pro-2A, and not throw anything else in with it. I will tell you that I am the only candidate right now running on the Republican ticket that has actual plan for legislation. There is a Missouri Revitalization Initiative that I've proposed, And people can find that if you're looking for it. You can find it on my social media feeds, which would be my Facebook and my Instagram pages, which are at Trares with the number 4 for Congress. Or you could find them also listed on my website, which is Trares, FORcongress.com. I'm actually proposing, when you went in to talk to me earlier about TRICARE, and I guess that's where we're going to go next because
Sure,
I'm going to lead you
can,
there.
Of course.
Like I mentioned, I'm an ex-military spouse. My children are currently still dependents of the military. Their father left the U.S. Army and entered into the Missouri Army National Guard. He's a 20-plus year Army vet. He served in the Macedonia peacekeeping mission. He went from there to be one of only 24 snipers in all of Europe since the Vietnam era that was deployed out of Europe since the Vietnam era to Kosovo in 1999. And then we went from there back to stateside in the Missouri Army National Guard. He served in Iraq. He served in Afghanistan. He's again served in Iraq. So I'm very familiar with the medical system. There's a lot of Democrats talking about Medicaid expansion. I'm against Medicaid expansion, but I'm very pro-TRICARE, TRICARE being a military.
Yeah, but to define TRICARE, I'm not even familiar with the term.
Well, there's other branches of TRICARE, but TRICARE in itself is a program that is there as health care for, and it does not include dental care. That's a separate entity. But the TRICARE program is actually set up for military. It's backed by Humana right now currently. And that's the other piece of it, too. I talk to, like I said, my clients that come to me, they come from Scott Air Force Base. They come from across the state into me. So I'm talking to even active duty Air Force, active duty military all the time. Very satisfied. I've got some of the best health care I've ever gotten in my life while we were active duty. And when there's a deployment, of course, that enacts itself again. There is an expansion proposal right now in Congress to increase TRICARE for dependents to the age of 26. So if you have a college student, especially kids right now that are coming out, a lot of kids aren't choosing to go to college right away, or with this pandemic, they're being held off getting their education, kick-started, or they're doing something a little bit different and they're picking up the trades again. So we're in a huge shift. But the TRICARE program, I'm also, with my Missouri Revitalization Initiative, you'll see in there a proposal to enact TRICARE when there is another pandemic, and there will be another one. That would be enacted with a executive order from President Trump, because also Trump's going to be reelected.
You're sure of that?
I'm most sure of it. I was sure of it the last time. He's the wild card, but he's not the wild card this time. Obviously, you know where I'm going with that. I'm a Trump supporter, 100%. But I would say to you that TRICARE is already tried and true. You're already paying for it as a taxpayer. And that's the beautiful thing about it. It would be temporary, but it would be enacted during a pandemic. There are a lot of people right now that have lost completely everything. And a lot of people that are in the healthcare profession, and particularly here in Missouri.
Absolutely.
I can tell you Mercy, one of the largest healthcare conglomerates here in the state of Missouri, has just laid off hundreds of people. And they're not laid off. They're furloughed indefinitely.
Until this mess is finished.
Completely.
Because they designated the hospital beds for COVID-19 patients. And if you're a heart nurse or a cancer nurse, they don't have room for you. Out.
Mm-hmm. Well, now you know what TRICARE is, just a little bit about it.
Very good. Very good.
I throw that in there to add to, since we're talking about TRICARE, it's a good segue into Medicare. Medicare right now, in my experience also dealing with aging parents, I have parents that are in their 80s. I also just work for the Department of Health and Senior Services. Medicare, straight Medicare, does not provide for dental care when you need it the most. It was when you're retirement age or aging. It's when your dental care are, especially those two are disabled. There's people that are struggling through cancer diagnosis right now that are under treatment, and they qualify for temporary disability. That would actually provide their dental care for them and not have to require paying while you're on a fixed income at that time in your life or pulling from another entity, a financial.
So you would roll dental care into Medicare?
Completely.
Okay.
No supplemental programs.
And that's for all people, not just for Medicare people, not just for the military, correct?
It would be Medicare. Medicare provides for, and a lot of people don't know this either, Medicare is not just for 65 plus. If you are 21 years of age up to the age of 55 here in the state of Missouri, that provides for those that have disabilities, which ranges from, like I said.
Is that Medicare or is that Medicaid?
That's Medicare.
That is Medicare. Okay. Very good. You're pro-veterans benefits. Again, I think to myself, well, who would be anti-veterans benefits? Talk about that a little bit.
Which specific benefit?
Well, I'm sure you've got more than one. I ask these questions. I have a buddy who
yes.
Actually he's passed away. He's been gone for several years now. You may know him. Major Mike Pate, who was a strong advocate for veterans. Even after he retired, to the day he died, he was a strong advocate for veterans. And he was big on getting veterans what they needed to